because I was always able to open up to anybody that I cared anything about, even a friend, much less your husband. And he was this way all the time I was married to him. Very evasive.
Was he gone for long periods then?
Yes, he was. He was gone for 3 and 4 months, sometimes out of the year, sometimes a less amount of time, but always no less than 6 weeks at a time. And he would act so bitter when he left. He'd get me all upset to where I'd tell him, why don't you leave, Joe? And so he'd act so sad, but he'd leave. And I saw later that he really intended it to be this way.
He was manipulating you?
Right, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Did he show any remorse?
Not really. No, it was just as though that was his line of work. Very dear neighbors that lived across the street from me. And they knew my husband, and they had known us for years. And so when Joe and I were married, and he would try to communicate with them, but I don't know if he was revealing anything to them that he wasn't saying to me. But these folks told me, they were first to tell me that Joe, in fact, was a priest. Many of my friends questioned Joe in their own minds, not to his face, but they thought he was a very strange person. They thought it was strange that he'd have so many absences from our marriage. But of course I took all the blame for that, not fully realizing that he was irritating me to the point of sending him away these times when it was necessary, in fact, that he was away. Because his church, I'm sure he had the calling that he had to answer, or the work that he had to do for his church.
At what point were you sure that you had married somebody pretty high up in the Roman Catholic Church?
When he had finally convinced me that it'd be wise for us to marry in his church. And I had belonged to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, or I guess I hadn't yet been baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but I felt that it probably would be smart to marry him in the Catholic Church. And so I went ahead, and then we went over to see a priest in Reno and was going to discuss being married. We had to go over to another office, another group of offices, and see a cardinal. And so when we went to discuss our marriage with the cardinal, Joe was rather talking down to the cardinal, and I felt this was sort of unusual because realizing, just common knowledge, that people didn't talk down to a cardinal if they were Catholics. And I thought that to be a bit strange, and the cardinal took Joe. The two of them walked away, supposedly out of range of my hearing. And that's when I realized that he, in fact, was a Catholic priest. And he had told me that he was going to, what was that word I wanted to use? He wanted to excommunicate himself. And I thought, this is strange, a man that devoted to church wants to excommunicate himself. And then when I heard the discussion about the priesthood, I threw up the papers and I said, I've had it. I'm going to quit. This is it. I'm not going to be married.
When you heard what discussion about the priesthood?
Well, I could hear little bits about your position and this position and that position. It was just very scanty, but I knew that it was, at this time, discussing his priesthood.
How long had you been actually married to him at this time? About?
Oh, 6 years, I guess. I threw the papers up, yes. What I have here I gathered up. I noticed that even my divorce papers are gone, but I don't know what's happened to those. But you did see the papers, the wedding certificate that I have, and I don't know what happened to the divorce certificate.
Did you take any pictures of Joe?
Well, there were lots of pictures made, yes. We had many made.
And then what happened to them?
They were taken. I don't know where they went, but I don't have any pictures left of him at all now.
Did he take them?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so, but who knows?
But you don't have any pictures of Joe today?
No, none whatsoever.
You'd mentioned that someone had broken into to your house and stolen.
Yeah, some of the things were taken from me, stolen from me, yes.
Who would want pictures?
There must have been something else packed in that box. I'm sure there was. Or, who knows? It's a crazy thing. There were quite a few things missing. Even personal pictures of my children, grandchildren.
Now, he made a boast one day about Hitler. What exactly
yeah.
did he say about Hitler?
He said Hitler was one of our very good people. Hitler and Mussolini, he said, you know, were good Catholics. And he said also the mafia. He said we have some good people in our church. When I showed him the book that I had gotten, written by Samuel Bakioki, he said, that's one of our men. And so he said, notice where it was published. And he turned right away to the area in the front of the book where it tells you published in Rome. And he pointed that out very carefully to me.
Are you telling me that in the same breath that he mentioned Hitler and Mussolini, that he mentioned Samuel Bakioki?
I'm not sure of that. I'm really not sure of that. I don't know that that was at the same time.
How did you feel when he said that? Did you think he was kidding you?
Yeah. I thought he was jesting a lot of the times. And I would question him about it. And he really wasn't jesting at all. But you had the feeling that he was. Joe was a very sober person, and it was difficult to know when he was joking, which was seldom. He was very serious. He had a serious mission within him that he carried out.
I was reared in Pasadena in Southern California, which is only a few miles from Glendale, where Merle Vance used to speak on Sabbath afternoons in his discussions of the Catholic Church with the number 666 and how paganism had worked into the church. It was intensely interesting. Even I've used some of the things he has said even yet today. But he had these mimeograph sheets that he used to pass out that had the pictures that he had copied from his various publications. I know he did a lot of study when he went back to the seminary. He was studying on the connection between 666 and the Roman Church. And when he went to the seminary, some of the people there said, well, now we think we know that there's a Jesuit on the staff here. And we think we know who it is. Merle hadn't been there very long until he said, I think I knew who it was too. Well, he continued his study, and he had pictures from the books that were printed in Rome by the church. And this is what was on these mimeograph sheets that he used to pass out. But at the height of his study, he took some of this amazing material which he had and took it to one of the leaders there in Washington and showed him what they had. This man, without even looking at the paper that Merle had, said, Brother Vance, that study is not for you. But he said, look what I've got. It's all here. It's proved. Here's the pictures. Here's the proof of it. There's no question. He said, Brother Vance, that material and that subject is not for you. Well, he was pretty downhearted. He went to his major professor, which was a professor of history, and he showed him what he had. This professor said, we want you to write your term paper on that. Well, he said, I'm sorry, but I've already talked with this leader, and he gave his name, and he says that I must not study this any further. So I don't dare write a term paper on it. Well, time went on, and some of his friends said if he didn't change his topic, he wouldn't ever graduate. In fact, the major professor said that. So he did change his topic to something inconsequential. Finally, the time came for Merle's graduation from the seminary. And it just happened that this leader had been called to Europe for a year, and it was during that year that Merle was graduated. So he had his papers. Following that, this leader died. And a very close friend of this leader was talking with Merle one day, and he said, I know positively that that leader, that man was a Jesuit, because I was a very close friend of him, and I know this positively. Merle was certainly a good student. I remember him when I heard a tape of him recently. I recognized his voice. It was so thrilling to hear his voice again because I enjoyed those messages which he gave. He was a good student, a fine man, a real scholar. Certainly he was a credit to this